The secret that made Vegapunk a target. The smartest man in the world is about to be erased. On Egghead, CP0 has already landed, Kizaru's fleet is tightening the blockade, and St. J. Garcia Saturn himself is on the way with a single directive from the highest throne of power. Vegapunk must die, and his research must disappear with him. First, let's take a look at what kind of discovery could possibly outweigh the value of the scientist who built the world government's modern arsenal. Vegapunk is not just a genius inventor in the abstract, he is the world government's top scientist, the architect of the Pacifista and the Seraphim, the man who decoded the lineage factor and turned it into weapons, and the creator of Mother Flame, an energy source so advanced it can rewrite the rules of warfare. So far, almost every major leap in military technology, from laser-firing cyborgs to childlike living weapons that imitate former warlords, exists because Vegapunk made it possible. Officially, he is indispensable. However, as we learn on Egghead, even someone this critical can be sacrificed when he learns the wrong thing. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about the secret that turned Vegapunk from prized asset into condemned traitor. The scope of this mystery is enormous because his work now touches every forbidden front the world government has tried to seal away. He has researched the Void Century and the Ancient Kingdom using the books salvaged from O'Hara. He has seen the parallels between ancient weapons and his own creations, especially the way Mother Flame was used to annihilate Lulusia in the form of a godlike strike from the sky. He knows why O'Hara was called a crime of knowledge, and he has drawn the attention of Imu themselves. This suggests that Vegapunk's true crime is not simply conducting illegal experiments. It is claimed that he has assembled information that connects the public structure of the world government to a hidden, ancient conspiracy stretching back 800 years. In other words, he has begun to map how the member states, the Marines, Cypher Pol, and even the scientific division are all instruments serving a ruler who is not supposed to exist, sitting on a throne that is officially empty. Forbidden science led him there, but forbidden knowledge is what sealed his fate. In this video, we will discuss this secret in detail. Is Vegapunk the first person since O'Hara to come dangerously close to a complete picture of the true history, the ancient weapons, and the real nature of devil fruits? And is that why the order went out to erase him at any cost? That guiding question will frame our entire investigation into the Egghead incident and the world government's most classified fear. What you'll know about Vegapunk that most fans don't. So, if that is the guiding question, what are you actually going to walk away with from this breakdown of Vegapunk? Today, we are speaking about Vegapunk not just as a quirky genius with apple hair and funny satellites, but as a political and historical pressure point placed directly on top of the world government's most fragile secrets. First, let's take a look at his public role, because officially, Vegapunk is the genius who keeps the Marines competitive. We will discuss his position in the world government's power structure in detail. How Pacifista, Seraphim, the lineage factor, and the Mother Flame are not just cool inventions, but tools that stabilize an empire of roughly 170 member states and deter rebellion in the form of overwhelming technological power. So far, most viewers treat these as upgrades on the battlefield. However, as we learn, they are also symbols of control that tell us what Vegapunk had to understand about history and about the people sitting above the empty throne. From there, we will map out the symbols surrounding his inventions. The barcode eyes of the Pacifista, the angelic wings of the Seraphim, the sun motifs around Mother Flame, the very way Egghead is designed as a futuristic paradise on top and a scrap heap below. In this video, everything you need to know about those design choices will be laid out as a layered code. What they mean in the story, what they imply about the ancient kingdom, and why these symbols quietly mirror the world government's own flag and the illusion of equality it is claimed to represent. Then, we move into the hidden truth layer, We will connect on-screen canon moments like O'Hara, Punk Hazard, Mads, Egghead, and the erasure of Lulusia with what Vegapunk must have deduced behind the scenes. When he preserves O'Hara's books on Elbaf, when he studies lineage factor with Mads, when the Mother Flame is test-fired on a member state, this suggests that he is reconstructing the same forbidden picture that once doomed the ancient kingdom itself. To keep this coherent, we will clearly separate hard canon from labeled speculation. You will always know when we are quoting the manga and when we are stepping into theory territory about Imu, ancient weapons, and the true nature of devil fruits. However, we will push those theories as far as the evidence allows, asking what a mind like Vegapunk's would logically infer once he sees the same patterns Joy Boy saw. By the end, you will have a one-stop structured model of what Vegapunk likely knows, who else might share fragments of that knowledge, and how that information could collapse the world government almost overnight. In the next section, we start assembling that model from the ground up, beginning with Vegapunk's official career and why the assassination order proves he crossed a line that even O'Hara did not. Before we dive in, help decode the world government. To build that model properly, we have to be honest about what went into it. This is not just a casual read-through of Egghead. For this video, we are speaking about a network of clues that stretches from O'Hara all the way to Vegapunk's laboratory, and that meant cross-referencing chapters, SBS answers, Viver card data, and even timeline details that Oda only hints at in passing. First, let's take a look at what that actually involves behind the scenes. So far, every time Vegapunk appears, he is connected to a different pillar of world government power. Pacifista on Sabaody, the Seraphim at Egghead, lineage factor research going back to Mads, and now the Mother Flame as a possible counterpart to ancient weapons. To understand what he might know, we had to map each of those inventions against the Void Century, O'Hara's findings, and the current political balance between the Celestial Dragons, the Marines, and the member states. Long-form breakdowns like this take time because we are separating what is officially confirmed from what is only suggested. When we say, this is canon, it comes directly from panels, SBS information, or reliable databooks. When we move into speculation, we clearly mark it and show you which symbol, line of dialogue, or historical event it is based on. This suggests that you can use this video as a reference, not just as entertainment, and that structure does not happen overnight. If you appreciate dense lore analysis, where we slow down and connect Vegapunk's research to things like the Empty Throne, Imu's erasures, or the destruction of Lulusia, then liking the video genuinely helps. It is claimed that the algorithm favors quick reactions, but in practice, your like is simply a visible sign that you want more of this type of content instead of shallow recaps. So, if you enjoy having everything you need to know about a topic in one place, please take a moment to hit like. In the same way, subscribing tells us to keep investing this level of effort into world government deep dives. We will discuss Vegapunk, the Void Century, and character-centric conspiracies in detail across multiple videos, from Imu's true nature to the role of D. If that sounds like the kind of long-term project you want to follow, subscribing and turning on notifications make sure you do not miss the next piece of the puzzle. We also want this to be a collective effort to decode Oda's hidden structure. What do you think Vegapunk actually knows that forced the assassination order when even O'Hara's scholars were only erased after a buster call? Leave your theories in the comments. We read them, we compare them with the material here, and the most compelling ideas will be referenced and tested in future episodes. In other words, your engagement is not just support, it becomes part of the investigation itself. However, as we learn more about Vegapunk's past and the classified projects he touched, the picture may shift. In the next section, we step into his official career under the world government and trace, point by point, how a loyal scientist turned into a man who knows too much. From genius to target, enter Vegapunk's public role. Now that we have framed the stakes and the investigative roadmap, we need to anchor Vegapunk in his most visible role. Officially, He is the world government's chief scientist, the man whose intellect stands beside the Marines, Cypher Pol, and even the Tenryubito as a structural pillar of power. In the public eye, he is not a pirate, not a revolutionary, but a state institution in human form. First, let's take a look at what that actually means inside the machinery of the world government. The Marines project overt force across the member states, enforcing law and order. Cypher Pol operates in the shadows, from CP0 downwards, managing espionage, assassination, and political pressure. Above them, the celestial dragons sit near the empty throne as living symbols of divine authority. Vegapunk's position completes this design in the form of pure science, turning ideas into weapons, infrastructure, and tools of control. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about that official job description before we touch his secrets. It is claimed that Vegapunk's inventions have advanced civilization by hundreds of years. We see this in pacifista units replacing human soldiers, in seraphim that copy the power of former warlords, and in energy research like the Mother Flame, which promises an endless, clean power source. On paper, this is the benevolent face of progress, a genius working tirelessly for the common good under the government's banner. However, as we learn from the broader structure of the series, progress in One Piece is rarely neutral. Every one of these projects ties Vegapunk more tightly to the central throne of power. Pacifista give the Marines an obedient, mass-produced army. Seraphim weaponize the lineage factor itself, creating living symbols of cloned authority. The Mother Flame, introduced as a miracle of energy, becomes linked to the erasure of Lulusia, suggesting that even clean technology can hide apocalyptic potential. So far, the official narrative presents Vegapunk as a loyal genius, a man rewarded with an island-sized laboratory, government funding, and protection in exchange for his brilliance. This suggests that, at least on the surface, his role is mutually beneficial. The world government gains unmatched weapons and scientific prestige, while Vegapunk gains the resources to chase any idea. To the average citizen, he is closer to a heroic inventor than a criminal. Here is the pattern interrupt. The world government's most dangerous secrets are almost never locked away in obvious dungeons. They are hidden in plain sight, behind institutions that look useful, even noble. Impel Down is presented as a prison for monsters, Eni's lobby as a courthouse for justice, and Vegapunk's lab as a beacon of innovation. Yet all three, as we will discuss in detail, exist to protect the same erased history. Understanding this public role is essential before we can understand why his private knowledge became intolerable. In the next section, we will begin to peel back that official image and contrast the loyal state scientist with the man who, simply by thinking too far, turned into an existential threat to the regime itself. The world government's scientific pillar. So far, we have focused on Vegapunk as a thinker who brushed against erased history. Now, we need to see how that same man became the visible scientific pillar holding up the world government's power in the present day. Today, we are speaking about the public Vegapunk, the one the member states are supposed to trust. Officially, Vegapunk is the head of the Special Science Group, or SSG. This unit was created to replace the warlord system as a formal pillar of world order after the Reverie, when the political cost of using pirates as state agents became too high. First, let's take a look at what that actually means. The warlords were individual symbols of power: Mihawk, Boa Hancock, Doflamingo. The SSG, by contrast, is a structure, a research institution that promises something much more controllable than famous pirates, mass-produced, obedient weapons. The clearest expression of this shift is the Pacifista program. These are human weapons modeled on Bartholomew Kuma, covered in metal, armed with Kizaru's laser technology, and marked with the world government symbol. A single Pacifista can devastate a pirate crew. More importantly, they can be built in numbers, We see during the Sabaody incident that deploying multiple pacifista at once turns what looked like a chaotic battlefield into a one-sided execution. This suggests that Vegapunk has given the Marines a way to industrialize individual power. However, as we learn on Egghead, the pacifista were only the first stage. The Seraphim take this concept further by weaponizing the lineage factor itself. They are childlike clones of former warlords such as Hancock and Mihawk, fused with Lunarian traits like black wings and extraordinary durability. They follow authority hierarchies instead of personal ambition. In practice, the Seraphim rival or surpass the original pirates in raw combat potential, but they are bound to the government's chain of command. This technological deterrent changes the balance of power between the world government and the seas it claims to govern. Before, the regime relied on unpredictable human assets, warlords with their own agendas, admirals with personal justice, Cypher Paul agents operating in the shadows. Now, the SSG allows the government to project strength in the form of standardized units that do not negotiate, do not defect, and do not demand a throne or territory as payment. In public, all of this is framed as progress and security. The end of the warlord system is celebrated as moral reform, while the rise of pacifista and seraphim is presented as a clean, scientific solution that keeps member states safe. Everything you need to know about this narrative is that it hides how deeply Vegapunk's inventions entrench the government's monopoly on sanctioned violence. Only the world government can authorize these weapons. Only it decides where they point. This is why Vegapunk appears indispensable. He is not just another scientist, he is the architect of the new order that replaced a whole class of pirate lords. So when the same regime suddenly issues an assassination order on its own scientific cornerstone, we have to ask, what could he possibly know that is worth risking this pillar of power? In the next section, we will discuss that forbidden knowledge in detail and trace how his research crossed the invisible line from state asset to existential threat. Vegapunk among the titans of power. So far, we have treated Vegapunk as a single pillar. To understand why his existence is now a crisis, we have to place him among the other titans of power that hold up the world government. First, let's take a look at the visible hierarchy. At the very top, above all law and above all member states, stand the Tenryubito. They are the so-called gods, living in merry joas, walking under bubbles, and using human lives as disposable property. They do not invent anything. They simply sit near the empty throne and consume the world's tribute. Beneath them, we find the Gorosei. Officially, they are the executive rulers interpreting the will of the gods and turning it into concrete orders. They sign buster calls, sanction assassinations, and decide which islands are allowed to exist on the map. Their power is not in the form of technology, but in the form of absolute political authority. A single word from them can redirect whole fleets. Below that come the Marines, the public face of justice. They are the enforcers, from fleet admirals down to ordinary soldiers, projecting the world government's symbol across the seas. When we see Pacifista marching in Marineford or Seraphim deployed on Egghead, we are watching Vegapunk's work literally wrapped in a marine coat, turning his science into visible power. Parallel to the Navy is Cypher Paul. These are the covert arms, with CP0 as the masked elite who report directly to the top. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about how they relate to Vegapunk. They arrive as clients, demanding weapons, seraphim, and new forms of surveillance. However, as we learn on Egghead, they also arrive as watchdogs and executioners. Lucci and his team are sent to negotiate with the very asset they are ordered to erase. This suggests that the relationship is built on mutual dependence and permanent mistrust. In this structure, Vegapunk stands in a strange place. He has no noble blood, no throne, no divine title. He does not sit in the Holy Land as a god. Yet his inventions shape every battlefield decision, from the pacifista line that replaced the warlords, to the mother flame that can erase an island like Lulusia in an instant. The higher you climb, the more you see that the so-called gods are leaning on a man who began as an underground scientist in Mads. The abolition of the warlord system is the clearest turning point. When the 7 warlords are dissolved, it is claimed to be a moral reform in the eyes of the member states. In reality, the gap is quietly filled by Vegapunk's creations. Seraphim, built from lineage factor and forbidden research, become the structural replacement that maintains the world government's military image and public legitimacy. If this many pillars lean on one scientist, what level of classified knowledge does he absorb simply by proximity to every secret order? In the next section, we will discuss that forbidden knowledge in detail and ask why a man so essential to the regime has become too dangerous for the people above him to tolerate alive. Official narrative versus hidden motive. So far, we have treated Vegapunk as the indispensable pillar holding up the world government's military machine. Now, we need to place that same man inside the official story the regime tells about itself, because the contrast between image and action is where the hidden motive starts to appear. First, let's take a look at the public narrative. In the eyes of the member states, Vegapunk is presented as a loyal genius, a state-sponsored visionary whose inventions exist to secure peace, justice, and technological progress. It is claimed that his research keeps pirates in check, stabilizes the seas, and protects innocent civilians from chaos. Officially, he is the greatest mind in history, generously funded and protected by the world government so that his brilliance can be shared with all of humanity. Egghead itself is built to reinforce this image. The island is a living advertisement for benevolent science under government patronage. We see future technology in the form of holograms, climate control, food materializers, and advanced robotics. Vegapunk's dream of free energy, the giant power plant drawing from an unknown source, is framed as an almost utopian gift, limitless clean power that could, in theory, be distributed to every corner of the world. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know regarding how this spectacle functions as propaganda, a symbol that the right alliance with the throne of power leads to prosperity and comfort. However, as we learn from the events of Egghead, this polished narrative fractures the moment we look at the actual orders coming from above. The same government that built Egghead, funded the Pacifista, and entrusted Vegapunk with Seraphim and Mother Flame, suddenly brands him disposable. CP0 is dispatched with a direct assassination mission. Kizaru, one of the highest-ranking Marines, is mobilized. Saint Saturn, a Gorosei member who almost never leaves Mariejois, personally descends from the Holy Land. For a regime obsessed with symbols, this is staggering. The untouchable rulers step onto the battlefield just to ensure that one scientist does not walk away alive. This suggests that we are looking at more than a personnel dispute. When an autocracy risks a global incident, potentially clashes with an emperor's crew, and exposes a Gorosei on the front lines, the cost-benefit calculation has flipped. Vegapunk's continued existence is now judged more dangerous than his inventions are useful. In other words, his knowledge has crossed a classified threshold. The crime is no longer what he can build for them, but what he has come to understand about them. To grasp that threshold, we cannot just list his projects. We have to decode what they are pointing at. The designs of the Pacifista, the Seraphim, the Mother Flame engine, even the visual language of Egghead's towers and the world government's own symbol, all echo the same buried template. In the next part, we will discuss that template in detail and ask, what are Vegapunk's creations silently telling us about the true history that the rulers of this world are willing to kill to erase? Reading the symbols around Vegapunk. So, if Vegapunk's machines are echoing some buried template, the next step is obvious. We have to read the symbols wrapped around him. Oda does not only tell us how the world government works through dialogue and exposition. Very often, he encodes everything you need to know about power and knowledge in the form of logos, architecture, and even strange little details in character designs. First, let's take a look at Vegapunk himself. Visually, he's a contradiction, an old man hunched with an oversized apple-shaped head that literally opens, and the famous Einstein tongue pose plastered on his early introduction art. Around that, we see hyper-advanced technology, holograms, laser grids, and then his satellites, who look like a group of exaggerated, almost childlike caricatures. This contrast is not random. It suggests that the greatest mind in the world is being framed as both forbidden fruit and mad scientist, a man whose knowledge is tempting, dangerous, and fundamentally out of sync with the age he lives in. Egghead itself reinforces this. The island is crowned by a giant egg dome, segmented like a brain, sitting atop a stalk of machinery. Officially, it is claimed to be the world government's future island, a symbol of progress for all member states. However, as we learn, the design feels more like a lab-grown world tree of data, isolated above the seas, guarded by layers of beams and clouds. This suggests that knowledge in one piece is literally enclosed, incubated, and controlled, not shared. Then, we have the satellites and the lab coats. Each satellite wears the same basic uniform, but their bodies, horns, hairstyles, and expressions exaggerate a single aspect of Vegapunk's psyche. Logic, evil, wrath, desire, and so on are turned into walking symbols, dramatizing the idea that one person holding too much information has to fracture themselves just to survive. Even the classic white lab coat, which should mean neutrality and science, becomes a costume for state-sanctioned experimentation that props up the current throne. In parallel, the world government's own symbols are speaking. Today, we are speaking about a scientist, but we cannot separate him from the five-circle logo flying above him or from the Marie-Joie architecture that towers over the red line. Those perfect circles, officially representing equality between the great powers and the member states, sit beneath an empty throne in Pangea Castle. However, we know that Imu occupies that space in secret. The neat geometry of the logo and the pristine palaces hide a core of classified violence. This is more than aesthetic analysis. Oda uses these visual choices to foreshadow the Void Century, the ancient kingdom, and the lies that keep the present era intact. The egg dome recalls the Tree of Knowledge at Ohara. The mother flame hints at a man-made sun, a possible false dawn replacing whatever light the ancient weapons once represented. And some of these same motifs are wrapped directly around Vegapunk's research. In the next section, we will discuss those connections in detail and ask, are these symbols quietly telling us that Vegapunk is rebuilding the very world the 20 kings tried to erase? Egghead Island, utopia or warning label? So if the mother flame is a man-made sun, Egghead is the artificial sky built around it. First, let's take a look at the island itself, because Egghead is not just a location, it is a visual manifesto of what the world government thinks the future should look like. Floating walkways, hovering structures, and an ancient giant robot sleeping in the harbor all work together to sell you a single idea. This is the pinnacle of government-backed science. Officially, Egghead is presented as a miracle of technology, a place where energy, comfort, and invention have already leapt 500 years ahead. You have the Fabrio phase with its vending machines and food printers, the Lapa phase sealed inside a shining dome, and above that, the mysterious control zones where Vegapunk's satellites operate. Each layer is clean, color-coded, and efficient. It is claimed that this is progress made visible, a model city the member states could one day imitate if they remain loyal to the throne. However, as we learn, that same layered design hides something more dangerous. The island is literally divided into research strata, and that becomes a symbol for how information itself is compartmentalized. Shaka, Lilith, Edison, Pythagoras, Atlas, and York each control a different function. They share a brain, but they do not share the full picture. In the same way, each lab only sees its own project, just as each Blue Sea citizen only sees the sanitized version of history the world government allows. So far, Egghead looks like a futuristic theme park. The robots are cute, the escalators talk, the clothes auto-fit to your body, yet beneath that playful surface, we find lethal Seraphim production lines, lineage factor manipulation, and the research that powers the mother flame. The smiling exterior becomes a deliberate misdirection. What you walk through at the entrance is comfort in the form of gadgets. What is buried deeper inside is warfare, control, and potential mass extinction. This suggests that Egghead is a microcosm of the world government itself. On the surface, the organization offers order, shared symbols, and promises of equality between member states. Underneath, it runs on erased islands, slave labor, and classified weapons. Egghead repeats that pattern in miniature. A bright dome that hides black sites, a public face of innovation wrapped around a core of forbidden science that once got O'Hara destroyed. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about why Vegapunk chose this place. By basing himself on Egghead, he accepted the role of architect for the government's dream future, but by inviting the Straw Hats into the heart of the Labophase, he turns that dream into a stage. The same cameras, transponders, and broadcast systems meant to glorify his genius can now expose the truth behind it. In the next part, we will discuss in detail how Vegapunk uses this so-called Island of Tomorrow to challenge the very system that built it. Logos, hooves, and the mark of ownership. So far, we have looked at Egghead as a stage, but every stage has a banner hanging over it. For the world government, that banner is a very specific symbol. First, let's take a look at the emblem itself, because this is everything you need to know about how they visualize control. The world government symbol is simple on the surface. 5 blue circles linked by a cross of straight lines. Officially, it represents harmony between the original 20 kings and the many member states, all supposedly balanced around an empty center where no single ruler sits on a throne. In practice, this mark is everywhere. It flies on flags over Marineford, it is stitched into the backs of marine coats, and it seals official documents, execution orders, and bounty posters. Wherever you look, the message is the same in visual form. Power is centralized here, and every action you see is authorized from that invisible center. However, as we learn more about Marie-Joie, we see another symbol of rule that is far more brutal. On the Holy Land, slaves are branded with the hoof of the dragon, a circular mark with 4 prongs that is burned directly into their flesh. It is claimed to be the sign of the so-called gods, the celestial dragons, and it reduces living people to inventory. Characters like Fisher Tiger and Koala show us what this means in detail. Once you bear that hoof, you are not a citizen, not even a criminal. You are property that can be bought, hunted, or discarded. This suggests that the world government does not just conquer territory, it rewrites what can be owned. Bodies are branded, but so is information. The Void Century is not merely forgotten history. It is marked as forbidden, punishable by Buster Call and erasure, just like O'Hara. Books, stones, even islands are treated like runaway slaves that must be tracked down and destroyed if they carry the wrong mark. In this system, only the government may decide which symbols are allowed to exist. Today, we are speaking about Vegapunk inside that symbolic cage. Working at the highest level, he has watched these marks of ownership operate from both sides. His research stamps the world in the form of Pacifista, Seraphim, and Mother Flame, all carrying the government's emblem and authority. At the same time, he knows that the O'Hara texts he preserved on Elbaf are treated like contraband bodies, branded for destruction the moment they are discovered. It is not hard to imagine that he has begun to see himself as just another asset, another piece of intellectual property with an invisible hoof burned into his mind. If that is true, then Vegapunk's classified crime may be something very specific. Instead of freeing a single slave, he is trying to remove the brand from knowledge itself. By broadcasting what he knows about the Void Century to the entire world, he attempts to make that information public, unownable, and impossible to erase. In the next part, we will discuss in detail how that one act turns every Denden Mushi into a rebellion against the symbol on the flag. Seraphim, angelic weapons with fallen origins. If every Denden Mushi has just been turned into an act of rebellion, then Vegapunk's most visible creations suddenly look very different, because the moment the broadcast begins, the Seraphim stop being just new weapons for the world government and start reading like walking, flying confessions. First, let's take a look at what these things actually are. The Seraphim appear in the form of children, small bodies, round faces, and the familiar silhouettes of former warlords like Mihawk and Boa Hancock. They have dark brown skin, stark white hair, and enormous black wings, clearly echoing King and the Lunarians. Then, we notice the star-shaped pupils, the same visual language used for celestial or divine imagery, sitting inside eyes that belong to cloned soldiers. Innocence on the surface, but underneath, they fire laser beams, slice battleships, and ignore conventional damage. This suggests that Vegapunk deliberately fused the image of a child with the destructive potential of a living battleship. The name Seraphim is not subtle. In biblical tradition, Seraphim are burning ones, high-ranking angels that stand near the throne of God and embody purification and judgment. By calling these weapons Seraphim, the world government implicitly casts itself in the role of God on earth, with angelic executioners carrying out divine punishment on its enemies. Officially, they are just a replacement for the Seven Warlords system, a rational upgrade for maintaining order among the member states. However, as we learn more about their design, the symbolism becomes hard to ignore. These are angels of fire created by a regime that already uses an empty throne as a symbol of shared, sacred power. So far, ancient weapons have been framed as enormous, almost mythical constructs. Pluton as a super battleship, Poseidon as a Sea King commander, Uranus as some unseen sky weapon. The Seraphim, by contrast, are compact, obedient, and mass-producible. In concept, they are like miniaturized ancient weapons, each one a controllable embodiment of catastrophic force. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know regarding how Vegapunk may be echoing, or even reverse engineering, technology that once existed in the ancient kingdom. If the world government fears a single ship or a single mermaid princess, what does it mean when it fields an entire squadron of child-sized judgment angels? The core of this project is the lineage factor. Vegapunk has taken DNA from warlords, Lunarians, and possibly other forbidden sources and stitched them together under government orders. Lunarian durability, warlord combatability, pacifista lasers, all concentrated into one standardized frame. It is claimed that this is simply cutting-edge science, but the reality is closer to a census of the world's most dangerous bloodlines being rewritten in the government's favor. And here is the real problem. If the Seraphim are the polished, sanctioned face of this research, what classified prototypes never left the lab? What failed, unstable, or morally unacceptable versions did Vegapunk quietly archive? And which discoveries did he keep entirely for himself? In the next section, we will discuss in detail how those hidden experiments may connect directly to the Mother Flame and weapons that can erase islands in a single, silent moment. Mother Flame and the False Sun. Those hidden experiments finally surface in the form of Vegapunk's most dangerous legacy, the Mother Flame. First, let's take a look at what this actually is in the story. The Mother Flame is presented as a concentrated energy source, a man-made core of almost blinding intensity, small enough to be stored yet potent enough to power colossal technology, or, when diverted, to erase an island from the map. It is not a bomb in the traditional sense, it is a battery for godlike power. In Vegapunk's hands, this core represents the dream of infinite energy. He speaks about a world where every member state could have light, heat, and progress without war over resources. However, as we learn, the same bright core that could run an entire city can also be fed into a separate, classified mechanism. The result is what we saw above Lulusia, a beam descending from the sky, followed by a flower of light that consumes land, sea, and cloud in a single silent moment. Today, we are speaking about that connection. The mysterious weapon that erased Lulusia is never officially named, but this suggests that it is a system built around the mother flame. Imagine sunlight focused through a lens, not to warm, but to cut. In this reading, the mother flame is the artificial sun at the heart of a planetary scalpel, channeled through an ancient weapons-style platform that the world government keeps off the books and outside any public chain of command. Symbolically, this is crucial. The natural sun in One Piece is repeatedly tied to freedom, to the D-Clan, to the idea of a dawn that will end the age of the current throne. The sun of the Straw Hat flag, the Sun Pirates, even the legend of a new dawn in Wano, all frame sunlight as liberation. By contrast, the mother flame is a false sun, owned, measured, and triggered by Imu and the Gorosei. It is light without warmth, a symbol of control rather than hope, proving that the rulers can manufacture divine wrath on demand. Vegapunk sits at the center of this contradiction. Whether he directly designed the Lulusia weapon or only perfected the energy source, he understands the mechanism well enough to recognize its implications for global power. So far, his inventions have shifted warfare in the form of pacifista, seraphim, and advanced battleships, but this crosses a different line. This is not deterrence. This is instant, unanswerable erasure. Everything you need to know about Vegapunk's crisis begins here, when his artificial sun is used not to illuminate the world, but to quietly remove a kingdom from history. That may be the moment his scientific curiosity collides with the reality of mass, classified annihilation. In the next section, we will discuss in detail whether this false sun is the true reason the world government decided that even its greatest mind had become too dangerous to live. From symbols to secrets, cracking the official story, when Vegapunk's sun erases a kingdom instead of lighting it, the mask finally slips. The technology that was sold to you as salvation suddenly looks a lot more like a quiet, celestial executioner placed in the hands of the world government. First, let's take a look at how Egghead itself is framed. On the surface, it is claimed to be a miracle of progress, a floating laboratory, clean energy, robot workers, and 6 satellites that divide labor like a perfectly ordered mind. The visual language screams utopia. However, as we learn, those same satellites are also surveillance nodes. The labor phase is a fortified cage, and even the future food and transport systems are locked behind authorization. The island is a symbol of progress that doubles as a prototype prison for ideas, bodies, and information. The Seraphim repeat this pattern in the form of living propaganda. Officially, they are the next step in justice, smaller, efficient, childlike soldiers branded with the world government symbol and sent to protect member states. They wear the halo-like laser ports, they follow command hierarchies, and they visually echo angels. Yet beneath that is the lineage factor theft, cloned warlords, and a design that removes will while keeping power. This suggests that what looks like divine order is actually the industrial production of obedience. Mother Flame is the final layer. A miniature sun, presented as pure science, becomes the invisible trigger for Imu's throne to erase Lulusia. No marine fleet, no buster call, no public spectacle, just a beam from the heavens, blamed on natural disaster and buried in classified reports. So far, every one of Vegapunk's greatest achievements carries this double face: progress on the outside, erasure and control on the inside. Once you read these symbols together, the official story collapses. The narrative of a benevolent world government funding a harmless genius to uplift all member states cannot survive the image of child weapons with halos and a sun that deletes countries. Today, we are speaking about a system that decorates its tools of domination with the language of justice and divinity so that you do not question why entire islands vanish without trial. And Vegapunk sits at the center of this contradiction. He's the mind that turned bloodlines into blueprints, that made Pacifista, Seraphim, and Mother Flame possible. He knows exactly what these inventions are for on paper, and he can see how they are actually used from Mary Jouai's down to CP0's kill orders. That split between intended purpose and real function is where his science stops being neutral. Here's the pattern interrupt. Vegapunk is not just a scientist anymore. He is an accidental historian. By following how his creations move through the world government, he can infer the truth they are built to protect. In the next phase, we will discuss in detail how the public claims about history, justice, and Vegapunk's role break apart when we place them beside the classified reality we glimpse through Imu, the Gorosei, and CP0. This is where his knowledge crosses from dangerous science into forbidden history, the same line Ohara stepped over when it was erased for daring to read what the throne tried to hide. The crime of knowing, Ohara as Vegapunk's warning. So far, we have looked at how Vegapunk's public image is built on progress and justice, but the world government's real fear is much older. To understand why his knowledge became a death sentence, we have to go back to the original crime of knowing, Ohara. First, let's take a look at what Ohara actually did. On paper, it was a small island of archaeologists in the West Blue, recognized by member states for its tree of knowledge and its scholars. In reality, those scholars used the poneglyphs to reconstruct the Void Century, the very period the world government erased when it took the throne. They were not building weapons, they were reading history. That alone was treated as an existential threat. When the Gorosei learned that Ohara was close to uncovering the truth about the ancient kingdom, the response was immediate and absolute in the form of a buster call. Warships surrounded the island, civilians were evacuated as a formality, and then the order was given to erase Ohara from the map. It is claimed that this was necessary to prevent the resurrection of an ancient superweapon, but as we learn from Robin's flashback, no such weapon existed there. The only thing that existed was information. Officially, the charge was researching the Void Century, a category of crime that turns curiosity itself into treason. This is everything you need to know about how the world government defines danger. Not rebellion, not open war, but reading forbidden text. The tree of knowledge, a literal symbol of learning, was burned until its trunk collapsed. The message to the rest of the world was clear. If you approach the truth that the throne hides, your entire homeland can be sacrificed. However, as we learn later, the story does not end in ash. After the incident, Vegapunk traveled to the ruins of Ohara. There, among the charred remains, he discovered that the giants of Elbaf, led by Saul, had salvaged the scholars' books from the lake. Instead of reporting this survival of knowledge, Vegapunk secretly financed and organized the transfer of the entire collection to Elbaf, preserving the very research the government had just annihilated. This suggests that Vegapunk lives in a deliberate duality. Publicly, he is the world government's greatest scientific asset, creating Pacifista, Seraphim, and even Mother Flame to reinforce its power. Privately, he is the custodian of Ohara's legacy, protecting the same forbidden history that justified a buster call. Today, we are speaking about a man who understands exactly where the red line is drawn and chooses to stand with one foot on either side of it. Ohara taught Vegapunk that there is a precise point where knowledge becomes a target. His later research into the Void Century, Devil Fruits, and the Ancient Kingdom is not an accident. It is a conscious decision to dance on the edge of the same crime that destroyed Ohara. In the next part, we will discuss in detail how that choice leads directly to Egghead, and why this time the world government may not be able to erase the consequences so easily. Who really rules? Imu, Gorosei, and the scientist. So far, we have followed Vegapunk from promising genius to deliberate criminal of knowledge. To understand why that choice makes him a target, we have to move above Marines, above Cypher Pole, and even above the supposed rulers of the world government. In the public eye, the Gorosei are the highest political authority. They sit in Pangaea Castle under the world government symbol, and it is claimed that they represent the collective will of roughly 170 member states. Officially, they advise, they arbitrate, and they guard the empty throne as a sacred reminder that no single king may rule the world. However, as we learn in the story, that throne is not truly empty. First, let's take a look at Imu. Hidden in the deepest chambers of Pangaea Castle, Imu literally sits on the empty throne, turning a symbol of equality into a lie. This figure is the one person above the Gorosei, the unseen sovereign who can order entire islands erased from the map in the form of divine punishment, as we saw with Lulusia. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know regarding how that hidden ruler interacts with the scientist who knows too much. The Gorosei and Imu together manage the most classified levers of power. They decide when to deploy buster calls, when to sanction a cover story, and when to quietly disappear a problem. More importantly, they are the custodians of Void Century secrets, ancient weapon threats, and whatever national treasure lies beneath Mary Joas. When an island is wiped out, when a bloodline like the D clan is targeted, or when a weapon like the Mother Flame is tested, those decisions trace back to this invisible apex. This suggests that Vegapunk has crossed a line that almost no one is allowed to approach. The assassination order against him does not originate from a nervous Marine or a rogue Cypher Paul director. It comes from the very top, from the same circle that approved Ohara's destruction and Lulusia's erasure. For the world government to discard its greatest scientist, his research must have stepped directly into the domain Imu and the Gorosei reserve for themselves. The true history, the ancient kingdom, and the real purpose of the Mother Flame. We see how serious this is through Saint J. Garcia Saturn's presence on Egghead. One of the Gorosei personally descends from the safety of the throne room to a battlefield filled with Pacifista, Seraphim, and Yonko-level threats. That is not routine oversight, it is a physical manifestation of panic, a sign that Vegapunk's potential to leak forbidden truths cannot be managed through intermediaries. If Imu and the Gorosei move directly, it means their most sacred secrets are at stake. So to understand what Vegapunk might know, we have to reverse the question. Which truths are they most desperate to hide, and why are those specific mysteries worth risking the exposure of a god descending to the surface? Classified layers. What the world is told is what Vegapunk sees. To answer that, we have to peel apart two overlapping realities. The story the world government tells its member states, and the story Vegapunk can no longer unsee. Today, we are speaking about this gap between propaganda and perception, because that gap is exactly where his death sentence was written. First, let's take a look at the official narrative. It is claimed that the world government has effectively always existed as a stabilizing force, born from the noble alliance of 20 kings who ended an age of chaos. The empty throne and the world government symbol of 5 equal circles are presented as proof that no single person rules, that power is shared and permanent. So far, the message is simple. There was darkness. The alliance brought light, and questioning that origin is treated as sacrilege rather than scholarship. However, as we learn from Robin, from Ohara, and from scattered archaeological traces, that story collapses the moment you ask what happened in the 100 years before that alliance. Officially, the Void Century is irrelevant, a blank space with no bearing on the present. Vegapunk knows that 100 unexplained years in a world this interconnected is not a gap, it is a deliberate incision. Ohara's books, which he secretly recovered and preserved, describe an ancient kingdom powerful enough to rival all 20 founders combined. a kingdom that did not simply vanish but was systematically erased. The same pattern appears with ancient weapons. Publicly, they are dismissed as myths, or at most as isolated doomsday devices that must never be named. In practice, the government hunts Poseidon in the form of Shirahoshi, weaponizes Pluton's blueprints as a pretext to annihilate Ohara, and may already be mimicking Uranus with Mudflame and Imu's sky-erasing attacks. Vegapunk's work on energy and the Mother Flame places him uncomfortably close to the underlying mechanism of these legends. This suggests that when he studies power plants, he is also, unintentionally, reverse engineering a god. Where other scholars only had texts, Vegapunk has data. His lineage factor research proves that biology itself carries records the government would rather deny. Devil fruits, which are officially treated as mysterious but random blessings, become in his hands reproducible phenomena that respond to will, memory, and perhaps the dreams of an earlier age. When he clones the warlords into seraphim, when he copies Kizaru's light, he is forced to ask, who first encoded these miracles into the world, and why do they align with the crimes of the Void Century? That is the classified layer no one else can access. He can cross-reference Ohara's forbidden history with pacifista schematics, with punk hazard experiments, with Egghead's energy grid. History plus hard science gives him everything you need to know to see the world government not as savior, but as the custodian of a stolen century. And if one man can prove that with equations instead of rumors, what happens when that proof is broadcast beyond Egghead? Who knows the secret, and how? So, if Vegapunk can turn rumor into equations, the next question is, who else is even playing in that league of forbidden knowledge? Today, we are speaking about a very small circle, because the story makes it clear that knowing the truth is rarer and more dangerous than any devil fruit. First, let's take a look at the obvious top of the pyramid, Imu and the Gorosei. Their access is political and archival. They sit above the empty throne in practice, and they are the only ones allowed to consult the sealed records in Pangaea Castle, the poneglyph rubbings confiscated over centuries, and whatever remains of the ancient kingdom stored as a national treasure. When they erase Ohara or Lulusia, it is claimed to be for justice, but in reality, it is the defense of this archive. Their knowledge is custodial. They inherit it as rulers of the world government. Vegapunk's path is completely different. He does not inherit a throne or a library. He reverse engineers the past in the form of machines, energy systems, and biological experiments. From the lineage factor and seraphim to Mother Flame and Egghead's power grid, he treats the Void Century as a set of reproducible phenomena. This suggests that where the Gorosei have documents, Vegapunk has data. He can test the legends of the ancient weapons against real blast patterns, or compare devil fruit myths to observable changes in human biology. Around them, we have other partial holders of the secret. Nico Robin and the Ohara scholars accessed history through poneglyph research, a linguistic and archaeological route that the world government officially brands as a crime. Their books, now hidden on Elbaf, preserve raw information, but not the tools to weaponize it. Monkey D. Dragon likely approaches truth through revolutionary intelligence networks, compiling reports from member states, defectors, and ancient texts into a political picture of how the current system was built. Certain members of the D-clan, like Luffy, Blackbeard, or Law, seem to carry an inherited will, a subconscious alignment with Joy Boy's forgotten cause, even when they cannot yet name it. However, as we learn, Vegapunk becomes the convergence point for all of these streams. He reads Ohara's books, decodes the technology implied by the Void Century, hears Dragon's ideals, studies the D lineage through the lineage factor, and then feeds all of that into government-funded laboratories. His lab is where ancient theory meets modern application, where a half-remembered weapon becomes a satellite-guided beam, where a mythical sun god becomes a measurable energy source. This is precisely what the world government fears. Imu and the Gorosei can manage secrets as long as history stays abstract. Once Vegapunk turns it into replicable science, the monopoly on power breaks. In the next sections, we will discuss his conclusions in detail, what he has really deduced about devil fruits, ancient weapons, and even the shape and nature of the world itself. Speculation. Break. Vegapunk and the devil fruit equation. Before we go further, we need a clear label on what comes next. This is our speculation break. From this point, we are speaking about theory built on Vegapunk's own words, that devil fruits are manifestations of human desire, and that their strange weaknesses are the unnatural recoil of that wish. Officially, that is all he says. However, as we learn more about his research, the implications become much larger than one scientist's metaphor. First, let's take a look at what it means if Vegapunk is being literal. If devil fruits are not random miracles, but repeatable phenomena, then someone at some point discovered how to turn an idea into a heritable power. Vegapunk's specialty is the lineage factor, the genetic blueprint of life. He has already copied Kizaru's laser, replicated Kaido's dragon fruit, and embedded Lunarian traits into the Seraphim. This suggests that he is not just observing fruits, he is reading and rewriting their underlying code. So far, the story presents devil fruits as scattered treasures that pirates and member states fight over. They look chaotic, like nature's lottery. But imagine Vegapunk following the lineage factor trail back and realizing that every fruit is built on a consistent architecture, the way different weapons can all be traced back to a single factory design. In that case, devil fruits stop being curiosities and start looking like products of a system. Here is the dangerous jump in logic. If there is a system, there was probably a system designer. Vegapunk's references to human desire line up disturbingly well with the ancient kingdom's rumored advanced technology. A civilization capable of building ships like Pluton or energy sources like the Mother Flame could also have created a global framework for distributing power in the form of standardizable fruits keyed to different concepts: fire, light, gravity, souls. The wish is the user's, but the infrastructure that catches and stabilizes that wish might be ancient engineering. Pattern interrupt for a moment. What if the sea's rejection of devil fruit users is not a curse from nature, but a safety mechanism built into that infrastructure? A hard limit to prevent any one person from fully dominating land, sea, and sky at once. If Vegapunk has decoded even part of this, he is no longer just a scientist. He is a systems administrator for a lost network. For the world government, this is catastrophic. Their public narrative depends on devil fruits being rare, chaotic blessings that justify pirate suppression and marine heroism. If Vegapunk proves that fruits are designed, potentially reproducible, and tied to a prior global order, then power is no longer a gift from chance. It is a technology that can be reclaimed, scaled, or even redirected away from the current throne. Even if Vegapunk has not said these conclusions out loud, the mere fact that he can map, copy, and improve devil fruits is enough to terrify Imu and the Gorosei. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about why that capacity alone makes his knowledge classified. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how this devil fruit equation connects to ancient weapons and the final war the story is building toward. Mads, the prototype of forbidden science. So far, we have focused on Vegapunk's devil fruit equation as a present-day threat, but to understand why his knowledge is classified, we have to go back to where his forbidden science began. Before he was the world government's genius in a lab coat, he was a criminal in a back alley think tank called MADS. MADS was not just a research group, it was an outlaw academy of science, gathering people who should never have been in the same room. First, let's take a look at the core trio we know: Vegapunk, Judge Vinsmoke, and Queen. Officially, their work was banned, their laboratories were raided, their funding was illegal, and their very subjects of study were treated as crimes against the member states. This was not petty smuggling or weapons dealing. This was science itself being declared dangerous. The central focus of MADS was the lineage factor. In simple terms, this is the blueprint of life, the genetic code that decides inheritance, abilities, and potential. When MADS started isolating, editing, and copying this factor, they were directly poking at the building blocks of existence that the world government tries to keep under lock and key. Judge used it to design the Germa soldiers, Queen later weaponized biology for Kaido, and Vegapunk pushed it the furthest toward cloning, artificial life, and eventually Seraphim-class beings. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about why this crossed an invisible line. In the One Piece world, controlling history is one pillar of power, but controlling heredity is another. If you can rewrite bloodlines, replicate rare bodies, or mass-produce specific traits, you can manufacture monsters or even recreate figures the government would rather keep erased. This suggests that lineage factor research sits right next to void century research on the list of things that will get you annihilated. However, as we learn from the later timeline, the world government did not simply erase Vegapunk with a buster call. Instead, they recruited him. That decision alone is incredibly revealing. It is claimed that MADS was dismantled, its members scattered or captured, yet the most dangerous mind in the group was brought into the throne's shadow and given resources. Vegapunk's genius was seen as both a catastrophic threat and an irreplaceable opportunity. This recruitment came with strict conditions. His work would be funded, but only under surveillance. His forbidden science did not disappear. It was moved into a classified, state-owned box on government islands like Punk Hazard and Egghead. The same lineage factor breakthroughs that had once been criminal now reappeared in the form of Pacifista, Seraphim, and other secret projects we still have not seen. And here is the important question. Did MADS' most dangerous discoveries really end? Or did they simply follow Vegapunk into the government's basement laboratories? In the next section, we will discuss in detail how those early experiments may connect directly to ancient weapons, the Mother Flame, and a category of research so forbidden that even Vegapunk hesitates to name it. Punk Hazard, a laboratory turned crime scene. So far, we have treated MADS as an abstract warning about forbidden science. Punk Hazard is what happens when that theory is dragged into reality. The island is not just a background setting, it is a monument to what occurs when Vegapunk's brilliance, the world government's power, and a total lack of oversight collide. First, let's take a look at Punk Hazard before the disaster. Officially, it was a government research base, a closed facility where top scientists developed weapons and experimented on living beings in the name of protecting the member states. In practice, it was MADS reborn under a legal banner. Vegapunk continued his work on gigantification, artificial devil fruits, and environmental manipulation, but now with virtually unlimited resources and the quiet blessing of the throne behind the scenes. The transformation of the island into a toxic wasteland begins with a single catastrophic experiment. It is claimed that a failed weapon test set the island ablaze and poisoned the air, leaving half the landscape frozen and the other half burning. However, as we learn from Caesar Clown's presence and the surviving laboratories, this was not an accident that ended research. It was a crime scene that the world government chose to leave standing, wrapped in a false narrative and sealed off from public view. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about Vegapunk's role in that crime scene. In the underground labs, he pushed gigantification to the point of child abduction and long-term torture, trying to recreate the power of ancient giants for military use. He studied the lineage factor to manufacture artificial devil fruits, culminating in the prototype that would later become Momonosuke's fruit. Each of these projects was designed to give the government new tools of domination in the form of obedient monsters and reproducible powers. When the disaster struck, the response was not accountability, but erasure. The island was declared uninhabitable, ringed with government security, and turned into an off-limits zone. Officially, Punk Hazard was dead. In reality, Caesar simply stepped into Vegapunk's old shadow, continuing human experimentation while the government looked away because the results were still useful. This suggests that the cover-up was not about safety at all. It was about keeping the narrative clean while the research quietly continued. Punk Hazard therefore functions as a physical graveyard of classified failures. The ruined labs, the abandoned children, the artificial dragons and gas weapons littering the facility are proof that Vegapunk has watched the government bury its own sins under fire and poison. He saw how quickly they rewrote the story and how easily the symbol of justice on their flags could be used to hide mass suffering. It is not difficult to connect this to Vegapunk's later moral shift. After O'Hara, after Punk Hazard, after seeing islands erased and laboratories left to rot, he understood that secrecy served the throne more than it served humanity. The Egghead incident and his attempt to broadcast the truth reads like the final step of a man who has realized that staying silent only guarantees more Punk Hazards. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how this realization ties directly into ancient weapons, the Mother Flame, and why his knowledge now threatens the entire system. Egghead Incident. Timeline of a silencing. If Punk Hazard was the warning sign, Egghead is the alarm bell. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about how fast and how violently the world government moved once Vegapunk stopped serving quiet secrecy and started preparing a public truth. First, let's take a look at the official beginning of the Egghead incident. So far, Vegapunk has been the greatest scientific asset the world government has ever had, and yet, he is the one who reaches out to them. He contacts the authorities, requests to leave Egghead, and asks to be taken off the board. On paper, this is a loyal servant retiring. In practice, this is the moment the system realizes that the man who knows the Void Century, the Mother Flame, and the lineage factor no longer wants to sit under the empty throne in silence. The response is presented in the form of routine bureaucracy. CP0 is dispatched, officially to return the Seraphim units and correct a security issue. It is claimed to be a standard retrieval mission. However, as we learn, their true orders are to assassinate Vegapunk and erase his entire laboratory complex. This suggests that the instant he asked to leave, the Gorosei decided he could not be allowed to walk away with what he knew. We move in a single step from valued genius to disposable liability. From there, the escalation is immediate and unprecedented. When CP0's mission becomes complicated by the arrival of the Straw Hats and Vegapunk's own defenses, the government does not simply send reinforcements. They send an admiral, Kizaru, and one of the 5 elders, Saint Saturn, personally. Around one island, the Navy forms a full blockade, with warships surrounding Egghead in every direction, and a Buster Call-like bombardment is prepared for a target that is not a pirate stronghold, but their own research facility. If we compare this to past incidents, the scale becomes even clearer. O'Hara required years of investigation before a Buster Call. Eni's lobby was destroyed only after a dramatic public attack on a judicial symbol. Here, a single scientist's potential broadcast is treated as a threat on the level of an enemy nation. The presence of Saturn himself tells us that the throne considers this operation as sensitive as guarding Marie-Joie. At the same time, Vegapunk's own behavior confirms that he understands exactly how dangerous his knowledge has become. He has already split himself into multiple bodies, created backup personalities, and recorded a message designed to trigger if he dies. His plan is not to whisper to a few allies, but to transmit his findings to the entire world simultaneously, bypassing every member state, every censor, and every official channel the world government controls. We will discuss the content of that message in detail in the next section, but we have to pause on the scale of the reaction. What single piece of information could justify mobilizing CP0, an admiral, a Gorosei, and a quasi-Buster Call against the government's own greatest weapon of science? Speculation break. Does Vegapunk know Imu's secret? This is where we need to clearly separate fact from theory. So, speculation hat on. Today we are speaking about what Vegapunk might have pieced together about Emu, and why that alone could justify the world government treating him like a greater threat than any pirate. First, let's take a look at Vegapunk's position. As the chief scientist, he is wired into government infrastructure in a way almost no one else is. He designs weapons, but he also designs systems, power grids for Mother Flame, communication relays, security protocols, even the hardware that routes orders from Mariejois down to marine bases and Cypherpole. If anyone could notice that the official chain of command does not match the public story, it would be the man watching the data flow. So far, the world government presents itself as an oligarchy ruled by the Gorosei, symbolized by the empty throne that, it is claimed, no one may sit upon. However, as we learn from the Mother Flame tests and the Lulusia incident, there are decisions being made that do not fit any published hierarchy. Imagine Vegapunk monitoring energy usage logs for Mother Flame and seeing emergency activations that bypass all known authorization keys. No admiral, no fleet commander, not even a Gorosei signature, just a higher hidden override. This suggests that the real orders are coming from an entity above the elders, through command chains, redacted directives, or repeated references to a sovereign that never appears in official diagrams. Vegapunk could infer the existence of someone sitting on that supposedly empty throne. He would not need to see Imu directly. For a mind like his, the pattern in the instructions, the timing of approvals, and the way everyone else defers to an unseen decider would be enough. Pattern interrupt for a moment. Think about Lulusia. The strike is impossibly precise, arriving almost immediately after the island becomes politically inconvenient, and it uses a weapon that only Vegapunk could have completed in the form of Mother Flame. If he later correlates the exact energy spike, the targeting data, and the classified order that triggered it, he is forced to conclude there is a centralized, secret authority with nearly godlike power to erase member states at will. Once you prove that the empty throne is occupied, the entire ideological foundation of the world government collapses. The symbol of 5 equal circles, the story of shared rule among roughly 170 member states, the idea that no single person rules the world, all of that becomes a deliberate lie. Exposing even the existence of Imu would show that every treaty, every tax, every officially equal vote is staged. If Vegapunk intended to say this out loud in his global broadcast, that alone explains the urgency. Before he can announce that there is a hidden monarch commanding the Gorosei and using Mother Flame to punish disobedience, he has to be silenced. In the next section, we will discuss what else might be in that message in detail, but the possibility that he plans to name the true ruler of the world is enough to justify the regime's panic. Ancient Echoes, Vegapunk and the Void Century, and that brings us directly to the question the regime fears most. If Vegapunk names the ruler on the hidden throne, what else from that same erased era has he already pieced together? Because the Void Century is not just a blank space in a history book, it is a deliberate wound in the timeline, carved out by the very 20 founders who later presented themselves as saviors of the member states. First, let's take a look at what that implies. If you erase 100 years of history, you are not hiding nothing. You are hiding someone. The ancient kingdom was not a myth or a scattered tribe. It was a centralized, technologically advanced civilization that stood in open opposition to the coalition that became the world government. The Buster Call on Ohara, the execution of scholars, the ban on researching poneglyphs, all of this is the modern echo of that original war, where it is claimed that knowledge itself was the enemy. Vegapunk, more than anyone alive, has brushed up against that lost level of power. On Egghead, we see him marvel at the giant ancient robot that attacked Mariejois 200 years ago, a machine that moved without any known contemporary fuel source and survived for centuries. Officially, Vegapunk is the greatest mind in the world, yet he openly admits that this relic science is beyond him. This suggests that the ancient kingdom operated at a technological ceiling even higher than his own, which immediately reframes the narrative of progress under the world government. However, as we learn from his connection to Ohara, Vegapunk is not guessing in the dark. After the island's destruction, he secretly recovered the scholars' books and had them preserved on Elbaf. Combine that archive with his lifelong study of phenomena tied to poneglyphs and ancient weapons, and you get something terrifying. A scientist capable of reconstructing not just isolated facts, but a timeline. He can map events like the original war, weapons in the form of Pluton or Poseidon, and the ideology of Joy Boy's side that threatened the founder's vision for global rule. So far, the world government has sold the last 800 years as natural evolution, as if the current order emerged organically from chaos. Vegapunk's research tells him the opposite. He can see that the present system is built on suppressing a rival civilization's legacy, copying its tools while burying its ideals. Pacifista, Seraphim, even Mother Flame all hint that he is retracing blueprints first drawn in that forgotten age. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know regarding why that realization is classified. If Vegapunk now understands that his own inventions mirror the ancient kingdom's arsenal, then the next forbidden question follows. Is he helping the founder's heirs maintain their stolen throne, or accidentally rebuilding the very conditions that led to the Void Century in the first place? In the next section, we will discuss what that parallel might mean in detail, and why his final message could be less about history, and more about history repeating itself. Joy Boy, energy, and the promise of a different world. So far, we have framed Vegapunk as a man standing between two possible histories. To understand why his research is so threatening to the world government, we now have to bring in the one figure their entire system was built to erase: Joy Boy. Joy Boy is not just a legend or a name on a poneglyph. He is a symbol of promises, liberation, and a lost era of abundance tied to the ancient kingdom. In the story, his apology to Fishman Island hints at a broken commitment to bring the people of the sea up to the sun, but behind that single failed promise sits a much larger pattern. It is claimed that Joy Boy's era combined overwhelming power with an almost utopian freedom, a time when the ancient kingdom could stand against 20 allied kings and still imagine a world without rulers on a single elevated throne. First, let's take a look at Vegapunk's own stated dream. He tells us directly that he wants to provide free energy to the entire world, that he believes energy scarcity is a root cause of war, inequality, and the brutal hierarchy between member states and the celestial dragons. In his view, people fight over land and resources because the basic fuel of civilization is limited and expensive. If you could beam power anywhere, if every island had light and heat without tribute or tax, a core pillar of the current order would quietly dissolve. However, as we learn on Egghead, this is not just an abstract ideal. Vegapunk has found concrete traces of an earlier, almost miraculous energy system. The ancient robot that climbed the Red Line 200 years ago, the machines buried under Egghead, and even the Mother Flame itself all point to a mysterious source that can drive weapons, cities, and perhaps even entire climates. This suggests that the ancient kingdom once operated on a form of free, clean, and universally accessible energy, and that Joy Boy's world was materially structured to make oppression far more difficult. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about why that matters politically. If energy is free, the heavenly tribute loses meaning, the celestial dragons lose leverage, and the world government can no longer decide which islands prosper and which starve. By reverse engineering this power in the form of Mother Flame, Vegapunk has almost certainly realized that he is not inventing a new future, but rediscovering a forbidden past that the founders destroyed precisely because it made centralized rule unnecessary. At that point, his knowledge stops being only about past atrocities and becomes a suppressed blueprint for a Joy Boy-aligned future. A world where ships cross the calm belt without fear, where sky islands and undersea kingdoms share the same limitless power source, where the empty throne is not just a symbol, but a practical reality because no single institution controls the plug. In the next section, we will discuss this in detail by asking whether Vegapunk's final broadcast is meant to expose crimes or to hand the entire planet a manual for living without the world government at all. The missing pieces: swords, thrones, and erased symbols. So far, we have looked at energy and infrastructure, but the world government also leaves clues in stone and steel. Some of the most important pieces of its true history are not documents at all. They are objects placed in plain sight in the form of swords, thrones, and erased symbols that only make sense once you know what is missing. First, let's take a look at the Nefertari family sword. In Alabasta, this blade is treated as a royal treasure, a ceremonial relic passed down from the time of the 20 kings. It is claimed that the Nefertari line helped found the world government, yet unlike the 19 other families, they did not move to Marie-Joyeuse to become celestial dragons. The sword therefore becomes a physical reminder of a promise half-kept, a pact signed in blood by 20 rulers where one house refused to sit among so-called gods. Another symbol of the world government is the empty throne in Pangea Castle. Officially, this throne represents the idea that no single person rules over the member states, that all nations are equal under one banner. 20 weapons surround it, one for each founding monarch, reinforcing the claim that none of their descendants may ever sit there. However, as we learn, Imu secretly occupies that space, turning a symbol of shared restraint into the center of hidden power. The throne is not empty, the story around it has been hollowed out. When we put the Nefertari sword and the empty throne side by side, we see a fractured origin story. One founding family rejected godhood and stayed on the surface, while 19 accepted elevation and cut themselves off from the rest of humanity. This suggests that the creation of the world government was never unanimous. It was a contested project, born from disagreement about whether any group should rule forever from above the clouds. Today, we are speaking about how Vegapunk fits into this. With access to O'Hara's saved books, the poneglyph rubbings, and 800 years of buried research, Vegapunk is the one person who can reconstruct the political drama behind these symbols. He can ask, what exactly did Nefertari Lily refuse? Why did she scatter the poneglyphs? And what price did her family pay for walking away from the throne? Everything you need to know about that original split is, in theory, already in his head. If Vegapunk spells this out to the world government stops looking like a natural, eternal order and starts to look like a fragile compromise. A secret monarch on a stolen throne, 19 families who chose divinity, and one founder who said no. Revealing that history would not just expose crimes, it would undercut the very idea that this regime was ever legitimate, setting up the next part of his message: what replaces a system once its sacred origin myth is gone. Foreshadowed flashbacks. Vegapunk as our future narrator. Once you strip away the sacred origin myth, you are left with a dangerous vacuum. Someone has to explain what really happened. In One Piece, that role is rarely random. Oda consistently chooses specific, informed characters to stand in front of the curtain and speak about erased history at decisive points in the story. First, let's take a look at that pattern. When the Straw Hats reached Sabaody, it was Rayleigh who calmly walked us through Roger's journey and the truth of Laugh Tale, while still refusing to reveal everything you need to know. In Eni's Lobby and Water 7, it was Robin who framed the Void Century as a crime of knowledge, giving emotional weight to O'Hara. Even Dr. Kureha, on drum, casually revealed that Gold Roger was actually Goldie Roger, reshaping the symbol of the D. So far, every major info drop about the past has come through a character whose authority we already accept. Vegapunk is being positioned as the next and perhaps final version of that narrative tool. However, as we learn more about him, he is not just a historian, He combines science, archaeology, and state secrets. His work on lineage factor, pacifista, seraphim, and the mother flame places him at the intersection of biology, weapons, and the Void Century's lost technology. This suggests that when the story is finally ready to show us the technical side of that era, the ancient weapons, the energy systems, the true scale of the ancient kingdom's power, Vegapunk is the only character who can explain it in detail without stopping the story dead, and Oda has already built a diegetic microphone for him. Vegapunk's attempted global broadcast from Egghead is not just a plot device, it is a literal in-story narration of forbidden history. Today, we are speaking about a scientist who tries to hijack the same global communication network the world government uses to speak to all member states in order to expose what is officially the greatest taboo on the planet. Instead of a disembodied voiceover, we get a character the world recognizes, addressing kings, pirates, and civilians at once. Here is the pattern interrupt. We usually think of that broadcast as a single shocking speech, but what if the message he prepared is actually a compressed outline of the flashbacks we will later see in full? A summary of Joy Boy, the ancient kingdom, and the first world government, delivered now in the form of headlines, then expanded later as complete emotional scenes. If that is true, Vegapunk's current knowledge is not just backstory, it is a trailer. Oda is carefully protecting him, chased by CP0, targeted by Imu, surrounded by Seraphim, because Vegapunk is more than a genius character. He is a narrative device aimed directly at the Void Century, a living archive that will guide us through history once the throne finally loses its last defender. Red Line, Marie-Joie, and the Geography of Control. And that archive does not float in a vacuum. It sits on a planet whose very shape has been turned into a political weapon. Today, we are speaking about the Geography of Control, the Red Line, Marie-Joie, and why Vegapunk, of all people, would never mistake this layout for something natural. First, let's take a look at the Red Line itself. In the story, it is a single, continuous continent encircling the globe, a colossal wall of rock that splits the four seas and intersects with the Grand Line. This is not just background art, it is a permanent blockade. To move from one half of the world to the other, nations, pirates, and even the Marines must negotiate a handful of artificial crossings, like the Reverse Mountain Canal and the Holy Land of Marie-Joie. The world government did not build the Red Line, but it built its entire system on top of it. At the summit of that wall sits Pangaea Castle and the so-called Holy Land. The empty throne is placed at the literal highest point on the map, surrounded by the flags of the member states. Officially, this is a symbol of equality. However, as we learn, Imu occupies that throne in secret, and the celestial dragons treat the world below as their property. Geography becomes ideology. If you want to attend the reverie, if you want your kingdom recognized, your king must physically climb to Marie-Joie and pass through gates guarded by Cypher Pole and the God Knights. This suggests that every major route of legitimate power is forced through a choke point the world government controls. The same is true for the New World. To reach the second half of the Grand Line without dying, you either pass under Marie-Joie through Fishman Island, under the scrutiny of government-sanctioned currents and routes, or you attempt some unknown, likely lethal alternative. So far, almost every formal summit, every major migration, every official declaration of war has to account for that single ridge of stone and the fortress on top of it. Vegapunk, as the greatest scientist in the series, lives in constant dialogue with this imposed geography. His sea train concept on Water 7 showed that he was already thinking about how to pierce oceans and connect islands with technology, bypassing storms and currents that traditionally isolate people. On Egghead, his climate control systems and transport tubes hint at a mind that sees distance, weather, and even altitude as solvable engineering problems. If anyone could imagine tunneling the Red Line, stabilizing Reverse Mountain, or creating artificial passages that render Mariéjois irrelevant, it would be Vegapunk. From his perspective, the world's layout is not sacred. It is an obstacle course that has been politically weaponized. Everything you need to know about the world government's power is written into where roads converge, where ships are allowed to pass, and where information can physically travel. Any invention that creates a new route that lets ideas or people move without touching government checkpoints becomes more dangerous than a battleship. That is why technology that bypasses or alters these choke points would be classified at the highest level. A sea train that crosses the calm belt, a device that stabilizes the seas around Reverse Mountain, or a method to make Fishman Island independent of Mariéjois' shadow would not just be infrastructure, it would be rebellion in the form of engineering. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how this fear of uncontrolled movement connects to the ancient weapons, and why Vegapunk's research brushes so close to that forbidden category. Egghead's location, a future thorn in the government's side. If movement is rebellion in the form of engineering, then Egghead is the map coordinate where that rebellion becomes impossible to ignore. Today, we are speaking about the island itself as a strategic problem the world government accidentally built for its own downfall. First, let's take a look at Egghead's placement. It sits in the New World, not far from major Yonko routes, close enough that a crew like the Straw Hats can realistically stumble into its waters, yet still off the main commercial lanes used by most member states. Officially, it is a government research site, but in practice, it functions like a scientific mirror to Mariéjois, a high-tech summit rising from a relatively isolated rock, protected by sea beasts, laser grids, and a controlled climate that keeps the island in a perpetual, artificial future. The geography matters because it explains both its security and its vulnerability. The Calm Belt prisons like Impel Down are defended by nature itself, but Egghead has to manufacture its own safety in the middle of the most chaotic sea. The climate control dome, the defense system in the form of pacifista patrols, and the satellite bodies of Vegapunk create a fortress that almost no ordinary pirate can breach. However, as we learn from CP0's direct approach and Kizaru's deployment, those defenses are calibrated around government clearance. They are powerful, but they are built on the assumption that the world government allows this island to exist. So far, Egghead has been tolerated because it feeds power back to the throne. Pacifista, Seraphim, Mother Flame, research, all of this flows from that one point on the map. This suggests that the Gorosei were willing to accept a semi-remote, semi-accessible lab as long as its products strengthened Marineford and the Holy Land. The moment Vegapunk invites the Straw Hats, though, the coordinates change meaning. A loyal facility becomes a meeting point between pirates, ancient knowledge from O'Hara, and cutting-edge weapons that were never meant to be seen by the public. By choosing Egghead instead of disappearing into some unreachable sky island or the deep sea, Vegapunk is making a statement. He could have hidden like the remnants of Mads or like the scholars of O'Hara tried to do, far from regular traffic. Instead, he builds at a crossroads of history, on a route where Yonko move, where Navy fleets can arrive, where news can leak out. Everything you need to know about his intent is encoded in that decision. He wants his truths to be discoverable, not buried. In this way, Egghead becomes more than a lab. It is the collision point of geography, technology, and forbidden knowledge that the world government cannot permanently ignore. You can erase O'Hara, you can sink Lulusia, but you cannot indefinitely overlook a glowing, weapon-filled island sitting on the same seas your admirals patrol. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how this unavoidable visibility turns Egghead into the stage for an ancient weapon-level crisis, and why the government treats Vegapunk's island like a potential second O'Hara with far higher stakes. Headquarters of the gods, Mariéjois, as a stage. So far, we have focused on Egghead as a visible target, but To understand why Vegapunk's discoveries are so threatening, we have to go above the clouds, to the place where those decisions are actually made. Today, we are speaking about the headquarters of the gods themselves, the gleaming city of Marie-Joie, built like a crown on top of the Red Line. First, let's take a look at the surface image. Officially, Marie-Joie is presented as the neutral capital of all member states, a holy land that transcends national borders. In practice, it is a city of impossible luxury. White stone palaces rise above the sea of clouds, glass domes catch the sun, and ornate bridges link celestial dragon estates that look more like private planets than houses. The world government flag hangs from every balcony as a symbol of unity, but that unity is enforced by chains you are not supposed to see. Those chains exist in the shadows between those palaces, behind the main avenues where bubble-coated walkways carry nobles in the form of floating carriages. There are cramped, windowless corridors. This is where the slave quarters are hidden, where human beings are stored like inventory so that a tenryubito can buy a person on a whim. The contrast is deliberate. Marble fountains in the plazas, iron collars in the dark. This suggests that Marie-Joie is not just a capital, it is an architectural diagram of the world government's values. At the center of this diagram stands Pangea Castle, a fortress cathedral of power. Inside, the empty throne room projects the idea that no single person rules, that the 170 member states are equal under a shared ideal. However, as we learn, there is also the room of authority, where the Gorosei kneel to an unseen monarch, and where classified orders like buster calls and island erasures are signed into reality. Vegapunk's funding meetings and briefings would have taken him through these halls, past murals of the 20 kings, past guards who treat him as both asset and potential liability. Beyond those official spaces lies a quieter, more unsettling area, the inner gardens where Imu walks among butterfly-lit flowers. We see this secret ruler moving through a night garden filled with impossible plants, a place that feels removed from weather, time, and consequence. Imagine Vegapunk, summoned for a private demonstration of Mother Flame or another prototype, catching even a partial glimpse of that garden, realizing that the true throne is not the stone seat in the public hall, but the shadow that moves between the hedges. Every trip to Marie-Joie would have sharpened his awareness of how far removed the rulers are from the suffering their decisions cause. You develop weapons in a freezing lab. They are approved in a perfumed chamber overlooking clouds. At some point, one classified moment in this city, perhaps a test of Mother Flame, perhaps a direct encounter with Imu's will, stopped being abstract science and became Vegapunk's personal breaking point. In the next section, we will discuss in detail what that moment might have been and why the world government decided that the man who saw it could not be allowed to live. Domain of the gods versus domain of the mind. That breaking point does not happen in a vacuum. It happens between two completely different heavens that define Vegapunk's life. The domain of the gods in Marie-Joie and the domain of the mind on Egghead. First, let's take a look at Marie-Joie as a lived environment. High above the Red Line, the Tenryubito move through the Holy Land sealed in glass bubble helmets, as if the air of the lower world is beneath them. Their streets are paved with slaves in the form of human chairs, human carpets, and chained escorts. Hunting games turn living people into moving targets for bored nobles. This is not just cruelty, it is claimed to be divine right, a daily ritual that reinforces that these descendants of the founders sit above every member state, outside any law. In this space, the empty throne is only a symbol. The real seat of power is the idea that birth alone makes you sacred. So far, we have seen Charlos buying people like toys, Rosward riding on a slave mount, and entire families dragged away for sport. Time here is measured in banquets and auctions, not in work. The Holy Land is pristine, curated, and eerily quiet because all the noise and pain has been outsourced to the slaves and to the world government's enforcement arms. Now, we move to Egghead, Vegapunk's domain of the mind. Instead of marble halls, We see cluttered laboratories, cables snaking across the floor, half-finished machines humming in the background. Childlike robots wander the streets, holograms flicker, food machines misfire. Everything is provisional, experimental, built to be tested and broken. This is an elite space as well, officially restricted and technologically far beyond ordinary islands. But its organizing principle is knowledge, not nobility. Today, we are speaking about two kinds of isolation. In Maria Joie, the bubble helmet keeps the world out. On Egghead, the isolation tank, the data vault, and the lab coat exist to let the world in as information. Vegapunk's satellites argue, fail, and iterate. Even the Seraphim, terrifying as they are, emerge from a process of trial, error, and refinement of the lineage factor. This suggests that his heaven is earned, but never finished. However, as we learn, these two domains are not separate for Vegapunk. He travels from his chaotic labs to the polished corridors of Pangaea Castle, presenting weapons like the Pacifista and Mother Flame to men who will never touch a wrench. He sees, with painful clarity, that his intellect is being harvested to stabilize the Tenryubito's hunting grounds, to guarantee that the bubble helmets never have to come off. Moving between these worlds, Vegapunk becomes the rare person who understands how the ruling class converts science into chains. That awareness is what turns a loyal researcher into a potential traitor. If the domain of the gods feeds on the domain of the mind, then siding with science ultimately means siding, at least partially, with the broader world against its so-called gods. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how this realization crystallizes into one classified decision, and why that decision may be the real trigger for the Egghead incident. Statues, brands, and the everyday propaganda of the gods. So far, we have focused on Vegapunk as a mind trapped inside a divine security system. To understand why his knowledge is so dangerous, we now need to look at the stage that system is built on. The statues, brands, and rituals that turn Maria Joie itself into a sermon about who is God and who is not. First, let's take a look at the stone and metal that dominate the Holy Land. Everywhere in Maria Joie, you have dragons, founders, and celestial motifs carved into walls, fountains, and archways. Dragons coil around pillars in Pangaea Castle, crowns and halos are etched above long-dead kings, and constellations are set into mosaic floors that the celestial dragons casually walk across. Officially, these are monuments to the 20 kings who saved the world. In practice, each statue is a constant visual reminder that the ruling class is older, higher, and closer to the heavens than anyone below the red line. The architecture makes this hierarchy inescapable. Streets slope upward toward the central throne room so that your eye is always pulled toward the highest point of power. Balconies are shaped like wings, staircases spiral like dragon tails, and even the lamps take the form of little orbs circling larger globes, echoing the world government symbol. This suggests that, in Maria Joie, simply walking to work or attending a meeting means physically reenacting the story that the founders want you to believe. However, as we learn from the way slaves are treated, the most brutal symbols are not carved in stone, but into flesh. The slave brands and explosive collars of Maria Joie are not just tools of control, they are daily rituals. Every time a Tenryubito tugs a chain, every time a branded back kneels in the street, the act reaffirms who is God and who is property. Public punishments like shooting a slave for sport or parading chained prisoners through the plazas function as a kind of liturgy. The message to the member states is clear. The closer you are to the gods, the more absolute their right to own you. Official ceremonies lock this all together. The reverie is held under towering statues and celestial banners, with the empty throne looming behind closed doors. Kings and queens from around the world stand beneath dragon motifs and star-shaped chandeliers while swearing loyalty to an order that, it is claimed, has no single ruler. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about how that visual language binds even rebellious nations into a choreography of submission. This is where Vegapunk becomes uniquely dangerous. If his classified research on the Void Century, ancient weapons, and Emu proves that these gods are just victors who erased their enemies with superior weapons, then every statue, every brand, every halo-like motif loses its sacred aura. The dragons become war criminals in fancy helmets, the constellations become propaganda, the empty throne becomes a lie carved in stone. What happens to a world government built on divine imagery when one scientist can demonstrate that its gods are only very well-armed liars? Speculation break. Vegapunk's personal line in the sand. If the gods are only very well-armed liars, then the man who built their weapons has to ask himself a different question. At what point does silence become a crime? Today, we are speaking about Vegapunk's personal line in the sand, and this is theory, but it is theory grounded in his actions. First, let's take a look at the pattern. At Ohara, he arrives too late to save the scholars, but he quietly preserves their books and sends them to Elbaf. On Egghead, he shelters the Straw Hats, openly defies a world government assassination order, and prepares a global broadcast. So far, Vegapunk has always tried to work within the system while secretly rescuing knowledge and people from its fire. This suggests that, for decades, he believed reform from the inside was still possible. However, as we learned from the Lulusia incident, there is a point where his own science crosses that line. The Mother Flame is his energy dream made real, a clean, near-infinite power source that could have freed the member states from heavenly tribute and marine fuel costs. Instead, he sees that same energy focused into a heavenly beam that erases an island from the map. Lulusia is not just another Buster call. It is Ohara without even the pretense of an investigation, annihilated in the form of a single, undeniable stroke from the sky. For the man who mourned Ohara's books, watching Lulusia vanish is the moment he realizes that his work has enabled the exact erasure he once tried to outsmart. The symbol of progress he offered the throne has become a button for instant oblivion. From that point, continuing to build for the world government is no longer neutral research, it is complicity. There is another layer. Vegapunk is summoned to Mariéjois, meets the Gorosei directly, and, we can infer, either learns of Emu's existence or witnesses a classified council where that existence is impossible to ignore. Officially, the empty throne is a guarantee that no single person rules. In that chamber, he understands that this is a lie carved in stone, backed by his own inventions. If one hidden sovereign can erase islands at a whim, then the system is not merely corrupt, it is designed to be unreformable. At his age, with a body that is literally splitting his brain across satellites, time becomes a visible resource. He cannot assume another decade to fine-tune a safer path, so the calculation shifts, safety for himself and his lab versus legacy for the entire world. Everything you need to know about his new priority is in that planned broadcast. His classified knowledge is no longer just data on disks. It is a moral burden he refuses to die carrying. Even if speaking it kills him, even if Mother Flame is turned on Egghead next, he has decided that one final transmission that exposes the throne is worth more than his continued service in silence. And if that is true, then the question is no longer whether Vegapunk will betray the world government, but how much of its buried history he is willing to burn on the way out. The illusion of equality. How Vegapunk sees the game board. Vegapunk understands that betraying the world government is not just leaking a document. It is overturning an entire worldview that billions of people have been trained to accept as natural. First, let's take a look at that official story. The world government presents itself as a council of equal nations, a family of roughly 170 member states, bound under shared laws, common courts, and the symbol of 5 connected circles. The empty throne in Pangaea Castle is displayed as proof that no single king rules above the others. It is claimed that this structure prevents tyranny, that the Marines and judicial islands simply enforce neutral justice in the name of global stability. However, as we learn from Vegapunk's vantage point, this is an illusion maintained with almost scientific precision. Behind the empty throne sits Imu. Above the equal council stand the Gorosei. Around them, the celestial dragons live as self-proclaimed gods, taxing the world through heavenly tribute while never answering to the laws they impose. Vegapunk has seen that this is not a federation of nations, but a vertical hierarchy, with one unseen ruler at the top and entire islands at the bottom treated as disposable pieces. From the inside, he also knows what kind of power this hidden layer hoards. Ancient weapon-level force is no longer just a myth from the Void Century. It exists in the form of Mother Flame, in the unexplained destruction of Lulusia, in projects that only a handful of people are allowed to even name. Officially, these are classified deterrents to prevent war. In practice, they allow a tiny circle to erase any light that questions their history. This is where Vegapunk's own work becomes part of the illusion of equality. Pacifista were introduced as mass-produced guardians, cyborgs that could be deployed anywhere to keep the seas safe. Seraphim were unveiled as the next step, combining Lunarian traits and warlord lineage factors to create childlike protectors. On paper, these are tools of order shared across the member states, but their command hierarchy tells a different story. They answer first to the highest government authorities. A king can request a pacifista, the Gorosei can redirect a seraphim and turn that request into a quiet execution. Mother Flame is framed as an energy breakthrough, a promise of abundance. Yet, Vegapunk has now seen it weaponized on a planetary scale. This suggests that even progress is filtered through the question of who controls the trigger. Because of his classified access, Vegapunk does not just see weapons, he sees the game board. He knows who can move entire fleets with a single order, which islands are marked expendable, and how information itself is turned into a weapon, from the erasure of Ohara to the censorship of the Void Century. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know about that perspective, because it explains why his final broadcast is so dangerous. So far, we have only outlined the shape of the illusion. In the next sections, we will discuss in detail what Vegapunk might reveal, the specific truths about history, devil fruits, and ancient weapons that could make the world finally see that the throne was never empty at all. What Vegapunk probably knows, a canon-backed list. So far, we have been talking about Vegapunk's perspective in broad strokes. In this section, we narrow that down into something much more concrete, the minimum classified payload that already makes him the most dangerous witness alive under the world government. First, let's take a look at the things we know he knows about history. Vegapunk is fully aware that the Void Century exists, not as a rumor, but as a defined, forbidden block of time. After visiting Ohara, he read the burned scholars' notes, memorized their conclusions, and then secretly transported their books to Elbaf. That means he does not just know that history is missing. He knows the content of at least part of Ohara's research into the ancient kingdom, the poneglyphs, and the original conflict with the 20 kings. Linked to that, Vegapunk understands that ancient weapons are not myths. The world government treats Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus as concrete military considerations. Vegapunk has studied the Mother Flame, a man-made energy source that can be used in the form of a small fuel capsule to trigger a Lulusia-level erasure. He has directly seen that this technology can replicate or plug into whatever system Imu used to wipe an entire member state off the map. On the scientific side, today we are speaking about everything you need to know about his core theories. Vegapunk has concluded that devil fruits are manifestations of human desire, crystallized possibilities that overwrite reality when someone eats them. He has mapped the lineage factor as the blueprint of life, the code that allows him to copy Kizaru's lasers into Pacifista, or recreate warlords as seraphim. When he says the current world map is artificially maintained, he is referring to this deeper pattern. Sea levels, climate, and even species distribution have been engineered since the fall of the ancient kingdom. However, as we learn from his choices, he also understands the political cost of that knowledge. Vegapunk knows that when information approaches the Void Century, the government's response is not containment, but annihilation. Ohara was not an accident. Lulusia was not a one-off. From the Buster Call to the Skyborn Strike, he can see a deliberate pattern. Any island that comes too close to the erased truth is treated as a cancer that must be cut out entirely. This suggests that he has also inferred the existence of an Imu-level secrecy above the Gorosei. Orders to erase Lulusia, to silence O'Hara, and finally to assassinate Vegapunk himself bypass normal channels. It is claimed that the empty throne symbolizes shared rule among the member states, but Vegapunk has lived long enough inside marine science and cypherpole cover-ups to know that someone is sitting on that throne in reality. Taken together, this is the baseline classified package inside his head. Even if Vegapunk never uncovered a single extra detail, broadcasting just these points, real history, real weapons, real maps, and a ruler who erases nations, would already destabilize the world government's symbols of legitimacy. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how far beyond that baseline he might actually have gone, and what additional truths could turn a destabilization into a complete collapse. What Vegapunk might know, theories with teeth. So, if that baseline broadcast already shatters the world government's public narrative, what happens if Vegapunk goes beyond it and starts connecting the deepest dots? Today, we are speaking about the kind of conclusions only the smartest man in the world could reach when he compares forbidden history to his own inventions. First, let's take a look at the weapons. Vegapunk created Pacifista, Seraphim, and the Mother Flame by studying lineage factor and ancient energy sources. Officially, these are modern breakthroughs. However, as we learn more about Pluton, Poseidon, and the unnamed third ancient weapon, this suggests that Vegapunk has seen functional echoes between his work and those legendary tools. Seraphim are living, self-directed weapons that combine Lunarian traits, warlord abilities, and machine control. Poseidon is a living, self-directed weapon in the form of Shirahoshi commanding Sea Kings. Mother Flame channels an unknown energy to trigger devastation from the sky, just as Imu erased Lulusia. The parallel is not subtle. From Vegapunk's perspective, it is claimed that he reverse-engineered future technology. But if he compares blueprints from Egghead, records from O'Hara, and the devastation patterns he quietly tracks across the member states, he could realize he has simply recreated fragments of the ancient kingdom's science. In that moment, the ancient weapons stop being mythical supercannons and become a complete technological ecosystem, with his own research as a missing manual. So far, the story has tied the D-Clan to storms, inherited will, and the enemies of the gods. Vegapunk, with access to lineage factor data, can go one step further. He has experimented on bloodlines, cloned warlords, and cataloged traits like Conqueror's Haki and unusual resilience. If anyone could notice a recurring genetic pattern in people whose names carry the D initial, it is him. He does not need a stone tablet to suspect that these individuals are the biological and ideological heirs of the ancient kingdom, designed or selected to resist the gods on the red line. This turns the D not just into rebels, but into a living archive. Their bodies, abilities, and tendencies toward freedom would be the last surviving documents of Joy Boy's era, written not in ink, but in DNA and destiny. In addition to this, Vegapunk's long study of weather, sea currents, and the Red Line's geology gives him data no historian ever had. He knows about the calm belts, the Grand Line's impossible storms, and the way islands appear and vanish from official charts. If he models these forces backward, he might arrive at a prior configuration of the planet. a world without the red line barrier, or with a single global sea rather than 4 segregated oceans. The red line would then look less like a natural continent and more like a constructed wall, a physical symbol of the throne's power over history and movement. If all of this is true, Vegapunk stops being just a scientist and becomes a historian of suppressed cosmology and destiny. He would be the one person who can say, with evidence, what the planet used to look like, how its weapons truly functioned, and who was meant to inherit that system. Now, imagine a single broadcast from Egghead that lays out that entire chain. Ancient science mirrored in Seraphim, a genetic will of D, and a man-made world cage. That would be everything you need to know to see the current order as illegitimate. And that is exactly why Oda will not let that transmission succeed without a fight. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how the story itself is structured to resist such an easy revelation and what narrative safeguards stand between Vegapunk's knowledge and the rest of the world. Speculation break. Who else shares Vegapunk's burden? If the story itself is resisting a full broadcast, then we have to ask a different question. Is Vegapunk really the only one carrying this burden, or are there other figures who each hold a fragment of the same forbidden picture? From this point on, we are firmly in theory territory, but mapping this network of partial truths helps us understand how the endgame of the world government might actually unfold. First, let's take a look at Monkey D. Dragon. Canonically, we know he is linked to Vegapunk through Bartholomew Kuma, through Ivankov, and through the Revolutionary Army's interest in liberation. Vegapunk modified Kuma into a living weapon and then into a mindless pacifista. Yet Kuma still chose to protect the Sunny and to serve Dragon's cause. This suggests that, behind the scenes, Dragon and Vegapunk have already exchanged information in the form of testimony about the celestial dragons, the heavenly tribute, and the erasure of entire member states like Lulusia. Dragon may not know the full Void Century, but he likely knows enough about the government's darkest acts to justify open rebellion. Robin represents a completely different axis of knowledge. She carries the last living expertise in reading poneglyphs, and she has already seen the records of O'Hara that Vegapunk secretly preserved. Today, we are speaking about two complementary forms of heresy, historical and scientific. If Robin and Vegapunk ever sit down and compare notes without interruption, her inscriptions from the ancient kingdom could lock together with his research on lineage factor, devil fruits, and the mother flame. The result would not just be more data, it would be a coherent theory of how the original civilization used technology and why the throne in Pangaea Castle was built on top of an erased era. Then there is Shanks. Officially, he is a Yonko who maintains balance, but his private meetings with the Gorosei are a pattern interrupt in the narrative. Why is a pirate allowed into the highest chamber of power, and why do the elders listen? However, as we learn more about Emu and the world government's hidden weapons, the possibility emerges that Shanks knows something about ancient weapons, about the national treasure of Maria Joie, or even about the conditions of Emu's survival. He may not share Vegapunk's technical vocabulary, but he might understand the stakes in a way no other emperor does. Around Dragon, we can also place the revolutionary commanders as secondary carriers of truth, each having witnessed atrocities in different member states. And on the opposite side, there is a more speculative group, potential Gorosei dissenters, if any exist. A single elder disturbed by Emu's decisions or by the use of the Mother Flame could become an unwilling mirror to Vegapunk, holding classified knowledge but trapped inside the system. So far, Vegapunk's classified knowledge has looked like a solitary secret. However, as we learn more about these characters, it is claimed that all of them are slowly walking toward the same revelation from different directions. In the next section, we will discuss in detail how the story might engineer their convergence and what happens when these partial truths finally collide on the global stage. From classified files to open sky, Vegapunk's endgame. So far, Vegapunk's classified knowledge has looked like a solitary secret, locked in one man's brain and one hidden lab. However, as we learn how he actually behaves, a different pattern appears. This is someone who keeps taking information the world government wants buried and quietly moving it closer and closer to the open sky. First, let's take a look at the trail he leaves behind. When O'Hara was erased for the crime of knowledge, Vegapunk did not just mourn the scholars, he salvaged their books and preserved them on Elbaf, turning a burned library into a time bomb of truth. He later aided Kuma not only as a cyborg project but as a courier of memories and messages, embedding human experience inside a weapon the government thought it controlled. On Egghead, he invited the Straw Hats, the most disruptive crew alive, into the heart of his research, and now he prepares a global broadcast in the form of a final confession aimed at every one of the member states at once. This suggests that his endgame is not to overthrow the government personally. Vegapunk is not a revolutionary commander. He is an engineer of context. Today, we are speaking about a man who seems to believe that if you arm the world with enough verified truth, history itself will act as the executioner. Instead of seizing the throne, he wants to remove the blindfold. The weapons he built for the regime, from Pacifista to Seraphim to Mother Flame, are almost secondary compared to the weapon he is building now. A shared understanding of what really happened in the Void Century and why the empty throne was never empty at all. By making classified information public, Vegapunk targets the world government's real monopoly, which is not only force, but narrative. Officially, the regime rules through law, marines, and taxes. In reality, it rules through fear and myth. The idea that researching history is a sin, that ancient weapons are unspeakable, that Emu does not exist. If Vegapunk broadcasts the true story, the symbol of that 5-circle flag stops being reassuring and starts being incriminating. Citizens, kings, even marines will see that the so-called guardians of stability are simply the winners of an old war who erased their enemy's name. In addition to exposing lies, his plan aligns closely with Joy Boy-like ideals. Liberation here is not just chains being broken by force, but people choosing differently once they know what those chains are made of. We will discuss this in detail later, but the parallel is clear. A legendary figure who tried to give the world a choice, and a scientist who now tries to restore that lost choice through information rather than cannons. If Vegapunk's true invention is a world that can finally see itself, what does that say about the core theme of One Piece, about freedom in a world built on carefully curated lies? Illusion, lies, and power. What Vegapunk's secret really exposes. If Vegapunk's true invention is a world that can finally see itself, then the first thing we have to examine is how that world has been blinded on purpose. The world government does not rule only through cannons and marines. It rules through symbols, geography, and what it allows you to know. First, let's take a look at the illusion of equality that frames everything. The world government flag, with its 5 connected circles, is a symbol that suggests balance between the great powers and the member states. The empty throne at Pangaea Castle is officially a monument to shared rule, a visual promise that no single person stands above the rest of the world. It is claimed that all nations are represented, that justice is blind, and that the red line simply connects people rather than dividing them. However, as we learn, every part of that image is a lie built into the landscape. The empty throne is not empty. Imu sits upon it. The red line does not connect. It separates sky from sea, nobles from everyone else. At the very top of that wall, Mariejois gleams in the form of palaces, bubble-lined streets, and literal golden streets for the celestial dragons, while the hoof of the dragon is carved into the flesh of slaves below. So far, the world has been trained to see that brand as a mark of criminality or subhuman status, not as evidence of a system that needs those brands to exist. Today, we are speaking about how Vegapunk's classified knowledge cuts straight through that constructed vision. He knows the Void Century. He has read O'Hara's books. He understands that the current hierarchy, from Imu's hidden throne down to the heavenly tribute that bleeds the member states dry, did not emerge naturally. It was engineered after the destruction of the ancient kingdom. This suggests that inequality is not an accident of history, but a deliberate technology of rule, just like the pacifista or the seraphim. In that light, even the criminalization of knowledge becomes another weapon. O'Hara was annihilated for archaeology. Mads was hunted for forbidden science. Punk Hazard was erased from the map. Every time someone gets close to reconstructing the past, the response arrives in the form of buster calls, cover stories, and now an assassination order for the greatest scientist alive. To seek certain truths is officially the same as treason. Vegapunk's real danger is not a single laser, clone, or mother flame. It is his ability to narrate these scattered facts into a coherent picture that makes the world government morally indefensible. If he explains that the hoof of the dragon, the opulence of Marie-Joie, and the branding of knowledge as a crime are all parts of one continuous design, then the symbols stop working. The flag no longer reads as unity. The empty throne no longer reads as peace, and that brings us back to why he must die. The moment Vegapunk teaches the world to see what he sees, the illusion cannot be restored. Once you understand that justice, equality, and even geography have been staged, how do you ever go back to believing in them? In the next part, we will discuss in detail how Vegapunk tries to break that spell in practice, the broadcast itself, the targets he chooses, and why the timing of Egghead matters so much. Why the smartest man in the world is the scariest to the government. So far, we have focused on what happens when Vegapunk shares what he knows. But before the broadcast itself, we need to understand why his mind alone is treated as a world-level threat. Today, we are speaking about why the title, Smartest Man in the World, is not a fun character quirk, but a structural danger to a world government that survives by keeping its member states ignorant. First, let's take a look at how his intellect actually functions inside this system. Vegapunk is not just a specialist building weapons. He is a scientist who moves freely between history, biology, physics, and politics. The same person who decodes the lineage factor designs Pacifista, studies devil fruits, reads O'Hara's forbidden books, and then advises on energy policy in the form of Mother Flame. This suggests that he is one of the only people alive who can see across all the compartments the Gorosei use to hide the truth. Officially, the world government separates knowledge into silos. Archaeology is cut off from military technology. Theology is cut off from geography. Cypherpole only knows its mission parameters, Marines only know their enemies, and even the Gorosei sit beneath an empty throne they pretend is unoccupied. However, as we learn from Vegapunk's story, a single mind that can connect those dots can quietly reconstruct the erased picture underneath. This is where their usual tools begin to fail. Censorship works when you can block information at the source. Erasure works when you can burn the books and sink the island. Propaganda works when people must rely on official narratives. But Vegapunk is dangerous because he can rebuild truth from first principles. Even if you delete the Void Century from every record, a man who understands ancient machinery, knows the real nature of devil fruits, and has access to O'Hara's books on Elbaf can infer what the ancient kingdom must have been. You can destroy evidence. You cannot as easily destroy the kind of mind that makes evidence. That is why the assassination order on Egghead is so revealing. Killing Vegapunk is not just about silencing one scientist who knows too much. It is an admission that the world government cannot coexist with truly free, informed thought at his level. It is claimed that they rule through justice and shared prosperity, yet they are willing to sacrifice their greatest inventor because his conclusions threaten the very idea of that symbol on their flag. And now, that same intellect has chosen, however indirectly, to stand with pirates, giants, and the oppressed against the throne that once employed him. As we move into the final part of this review, We will discuss in detail what it means for the story that the greatest scientific mind in the setting has crossed that line, and what kind of world he is really trying to create by doing so. From Egghead to the Endgame, where Vegapunk's secret leads the story. From here on, Egghead stops feeling like an isolated crisis and starts reading as a rehearsal. The so-called Egghead incident is a controlled test of something much bigger. What happens when classified truth collides directly with institutional power, live in front of the whole world. The siege, the cover-up, the scramble cut the signal. All of it is a smaller, deniable version of the confrontation that will eventually reach the Holy Land itself. First, let's take a look at what Egghead actually represents in the narrative. We have a genius who served the world government, standing on an island built as a monument to progress, trying to send forbidden history out in the form of a broadcast, while the Gorosei personally moved to silence him. So far, this is a mirror of Ohara, but with cameras instead of books, satellites instead of scholars, and the strongest generation of pirates on the front line instead of a single archaeologist. However, as we learn more about Vegapunk's preparations, it becomes clear that his death is almost irrelevant. The man who backed up his own mind into satellites was never going to rely on a single body or a single speech. Even if he is erased physically, his knowledge persists in recordings hidden around the world, in punk records, in the minds of his satellites, and in the hands of allies like Dragon and the Straw Hats. This suggests that the Revolutionary Army's next stage will not just be military, it will be informational warfare powered by Vegapunk's data. Today, we are speaking about everything you need to know regarding how that data guides the final saga. The books he saved from Ohara are already on Elbaf, inside what is likely the greatest library on the seas. When the Straw Hats finally reach the Island of Giants, they are not just visiting another member state. They are walking into the continuation of Clover's work, now upgraded by Vegapunk's science. Elbaf becomes the place where archaeology, technology, and the will of D converge around the last unread chapters of the Void Century. From there, the path leads naturally to the remaining poneglyphs and the final reading of Laugh-Tale's message. Vegapunk's theories about the ancient kingdom, about the sea level, about Mother Flame, and the nature of devil fruits will frame how we and the characters interpret those stones. When the next global broadcast happens, whether through the transponder snails, the ancient network, or some new invention, it is claimed it will succeed precisely because Vegapunk designed it to outplay the censorship that destroyed O'Hara and is now striking Egghead. In that sense, Vegapunk is not meant to be the explosion that topples the throne. His role is to light the fuse, to expose the fault lines in the official story, and to hand the matches to people like Luffy, Robin, Dragon, and the Giants. The real impact of his classified knowledge will be measured in how the member states react when the lie of the empty throne is finally undeniable. As we move into the later arcs, we should watch for how often Vegapunk's fingerprints appear on the unraveling illusions of this world, in ancient machines waking up, in altered weapons turning on their masters, and in a population that can no longer pretend not to know. Your turn to decode Vegapunk's secret. So far, we have followed Vegapunk from the surface to the shadows. We started with his public role as the genius behind Pacifista, Seraphim, and the Mother Flame, the man the world government presents as a neutral scientist serving all member states equally. Then, we moved inward, reading the symbols around him, the empty throne, the world government flag, the illusion that no single person rules. From there, we descended into hidden rulers, erased centuries, and finally into concrete and speculative lists of what he might actually know. Today, we are speaking about what that journey really showed us. Vegapunk's classified knowledge is not just trivia about ancient machines or rare devil fruits. It is a mirror held up to the world government's lies. Every file he opens on the Void Century, every record he preserved from O'Hara, every experiment that traces the lineage factor back to a forgotten civilization, exposes how fragile the official story of equality and justice really is. It is claimed that all nations sit beneath one fair symbol. However, his data suggests that the system is built on erasure and control. First, let's take a look at the core idea one more time. The empty throne is supposed to be the ultimate guarantee that no one rules alone. Vegapunk's research, from the Mother Flame's connection to island erasing weapons, to his awareness of Imu's interest in him, shows that this throne is not empty at all. When he decodes poneglyph knowledge, when he links ancient weapons to present technology, he is effectively proving that the world government's greatest symbol is a staged prop designed to keep member states obedient. So now we want to hand that mirror to you. In the comments, tell us what you think Vegapunk's single most dangerous discovery really is. Is it Imu's existence and the fact that the empty throne is occupied? Is it the true nature and origin of devil fruits as a wish-granting system from the ancient kingdom? Is it the blueprint-level truth of ancient weapons, or something else entirely that we have only hinted at in the story so far? Which one piece of knowledge would most decisively shatter this world if it became public? If you enjoyed this kind of structured, lore-dense breakdown where we take a topic and give you everything you need to know in the form of a clear path from symbols to systems to secrets, make sure to like the video. Subscribe as well because we will discuss Imu, the Gorosei, and the final war in detail in upcoming episodes, connecting Vegapunk's files to the last moves on the board. To stay in the rabbit hole, your next stop should be our breakdown of the world government structure and the true hierarchy above the member states, or our Void Century timeline episode that maps the fall of the ancient kingdom step by step. Because once you see how those events line up with Vegapunk's life, the question is no longer whether he knows too much, but which secret he will choose to reveal first. Final thought, the day classified becomes common knowledge. So, if the real question is which secret Vegapunk will choose to reveal first, the real destination is the day those secrets stop being classified at all. There is a point coming where the things only Vegapunk, the Gorosei, and Imu know about history, power, and the gods of this world become common knowledge, not hidden footnotes. First, let's take a look at what that actually means inside the story. Today, we are speaking about a world where the Void Century is a rumor, where the ancient kingdom is a blank page, and where the world government can erase islands like O'Hara or Lulusia and still claim, officially, that nothing unusual happened. On the day Vegapunk's full research is broadcast, the symbol on their flags, the empty throne, and even the idea of justice will be reinterpreted in real time by every citizen under those 170 member states. So far, people choose sides based on fragments. Pirates are labeled criminals, revolutionaries are labeled terrorists, and Marines are labeled heroes because it is claimed they defend peace. However, as we learn more about Imu, the heavenly tribute, and the use of weapons like Mother Flame, this suggests that the real crime has always been monopolizing the truth. When Vegapunk explains what the lineage factor really is, how devil fruits might be the crystallized wishes of an older civilization, or why an entire century was cut out of the record, the categories of hero and villain will not survive unchanged. On that day, a Marine like Smoker or Fujitora will no longer be able to say, "I did not know." Revolutionary soldiers will see their ideology confirmed or challenged, not in the form of slogans, but in the form of laboratory data and survivor testimony from places like O'Hara and Punk Hazard. Even pirates who only wanted treasure will have to decide whether they are comfortable sailing on a sea built over mass graves and erased kingdoms. In that sense, the endgame of One Piece is not just about a treasure chest on Laugh Tale. It is about rewriting what the world believes is possible and permissible. Everything you need to know about the ancient weapons, The true map of the world and the origin of the devil fruits points toward a single confrontation, not only over physical power, but over who is allowed to define reality. Vegapunk's legacy sits exactly at that fault line. Whether he survives Egghead or dies like Clover and Tom, his choice to preserve O'Hara's books, to question Mother Flame, and to challenge the world government's control over science means his ideas are already loose. We will discuss the final arcs in detail in future episodes, but the shape is clear. Every faction will be forced to act with full information. And in One Piece, as in our world, the most dangerous weapon is not a laser, a pacifista, or an ancient cannon. It is the moment when people finally see the system for what it is. If you want to be ready for that moment, stay with us for the next part of this series.